You're listening to the Narrative Nest, where every whisper hides a wound, and every story bleeds through the silence. What if your daughter vanished, and no one ever told you why? This is Vanished in Maple Hollow, Episode 1, The Last. Morning of Rosalina Grace Carter's life began like any other cool air. Golden leaves, and the smell of fresh toast coming from the kitchen window. She was tying her sneakers on the front steps of their Maple Hollow home, her blue cotton dress swinging just above her knees as she hummed something she'd heard on the radio. Her backpack was slightly too big for her. It always was. 11 years old and always trying to grow up faster than her small frame allowed. Her mother leaned out the door with a mug of coffee in one hand and called out, "Tie those laces, Rose. You'll trip again." Rose grinned over her shoulder, her ponytail swinging. "I'll do it after school." She called back. That would be the last sentence her mother ever heard from her. Maple Hollow was the kind of small Pennsylvania town that always felt like it had stopped moving somewhere in the 1980s. One grocery store, 2 diners, a single school serving all the elementary kids. People knew each other by name, waved from porches, and locked their doors more out of habit than fear. That illusion of safety was what made her disappearance so paralyzing. Rosalina, or Rose, as everyone called her, walked the 10 minutes to school the way she always did. Past Mrs. Green's porch with the plastic flamingos, across Hollow Street where the old dog barked at passing kids, and through the side entrance of Maple Hollow Elementary. That was at 8:14 a.m. At 2:45 p.m., her teacher told the class to pack up. At 3:05, students poured out of the front doors in waves of shouting and laughter. At 3:10, her mother waited by the window, watching the street. At 3:30, she called the school. At 4 o'clock, the police were notified. By 6 p.m., half the town had joined the search. No one could find her. The last verified sighting of Rose was during history class. She had answered a question about the Underground Railroad, smiled when the teacher praised her, then looked out the window for a long time. Her lunch was only half eaten. Her backpack was never found. Posters went up. Her face, bright eyes, narrow chin, freckles, was printed and taped to trees, cars, grocery store windows. Her father, David, led most of the searchers. His voice went hoarse from calling her name. His hands bled from clawing through brush and dragging aside dead logs. The police investigated. They questioned everyone, especially her teacher, Mr. Elijah Whitmore. He was in his mid-30s, clean-shaven, charismatic, had taught at Maple Hollow for 3 years. He said all the right things, showed up to vigils, cried when he spoke to the media, brought flowers to the Carter family, said Rose reminded him of his niece. They searched his home. They found nothing, no blood, no prints, no clothing, no motive. He had a clean record, a spotless past. The investigation lost steam. Days passed, then weeks, then months. David and his wife stayed in town for nearly a year, but after a while, even hope started to feel like poison. They separated. She moved south. He left town. The house was sold. The garden grew wild. The town mourned. Then it forgot. 9 years later, in the fall of 2025, David Carter returned to Maple Hollow. No one recognized him anymore. His once dark hair had gone silver at the sides, his shoulders slumped a little more, and the light in his eyes had long gone out. He didn't come back as a father looking for closure. He came back as a gardener. The school posted a part-time opening. He applied under a different address, didn't mention his past. And when they gave him a work badge and a ring of keys, something inside him, something long buried, stirred. On his first day, he walked the school grounds, pushing a mop cart, fixing sprinklers, raking leaves. The same old red slide still creaked in the wind. The gym smelled the same. Even the teachers looked eerily unchanged. Some new faces, but one name still echoed through the halls like rot beneath paint. Mr. Whitmore, still teaching, still smiling, still shaking hands with parents at pickup. David felt sick the first time he passed him in the hallway. Whitmore didn't flinch, didn't look up. Maybe he didn't recognize him, or maybe he did and simply didn't care. That night, David couldn't sleep. His apartment was a dusty one-room rental above a closed-down bookstore. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun slow circles above him. He had told himself he wasn't coming back to dig up ghosts, but that was a lie. On the third day, he was trimming overgrowth behind the old gym, a patch of earth most staff had forgotten about. The trees had grown thick, the weeds taller than his knees. That's when he saw it, a strip of faded blue fabric sticking out from the soil. His breath caught in his throat. He knelt down, pulled at it gently. The dirt crumbled away, revealing a delicate piece of cloth, old and tattered, but still holding the outline of a small embroidered flower. A daisy. He had seen that daisy before, 9 years ago, on the corner of Rose's favorite dress. His hands trembled. He stood slowly, fabric in hand, wind blowing sharp against his face. He stared down at the earth beneath him. There was no mistake. This wasn't just coincidence. She had been here all these years, buried under their feet. He didn't cry, not this time. Grief had no room left in him, only silence, and something colder. He went back the next morning like nothing had happened, cleaned bathrooms, fixed fences, replaced a water pipe. But every moment his eyes flicked toward Mr. Whitmore's classroom. His grip on the tool tightened. That afternoon, he returned to the garden with gloves and a hand spade. He dug quietly, careful not to leave marks. 2 feet down, the soil changed, softer, almost disturbed. Then his fingers brushed something rubbery. He stopped breathing. A small white sneaker, faded. One side cracked from time, a butterfly sticker still clinging to the edge. He'd bought those shoes for her birthday. 9 years ago, he stared at it in his palm, not moving, not thinking. Then he placed it gently in a box and covered the hole. Again, no police, no media, not justice, not yet. He needed to know everything first. He started watching Whitmore. The man lived in a 2-story grey house at the edge of town, neat, bland, lifeless. He drove a silver sedan, drank coffee at the same diner every Saturday, gardened on Sundays. David followed quietly, took notes, photographed license plates, marked his routine. One night, Whitmore left his porch light on. David left a single white flower at the door. Another night, Whitmore went to sleep at 11:07 p.m. At 11:30, David left a child's shoe print near his garden. Nothing illegal, nothing direct, just ... Pressure, silence, weight, the kind of pressure that cracks the guilty. Whitmore started coming to work late, jittery, less talkative. His hands shook when he opened lockers. His windows stayed shut even on hot days. The cracks had begun. And David Carter, he was only getting started. You've just listened to episode 1 of Vanished in Maple Hollow, only on the Narrative Nest, where every shadow tells a story, And some stories never rest until they're heard. If this tale gripped your soul, if your heart raced at the silence between words, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for the next chilling chapter. What would you do if the man who stole your child's life was smiling in a classroom every single day? David stopped sleeping altogether. The apartment above the bookstore smelled like mold and cardboard. But that wasn't what kept him awake. It was the thoughts, the memories, the sound of Rose's laughter, sharp and clear like wind chimes, echoing inside his skull every time he closed his eyes. He replayed it constantly. The cloth, the sneaker, the exact position of the soil, how deep, how soft, what direction the fabric had been pointing. She had been buried on school grounds. He didn't know if the whole body was there. He couldn't bring himself to dig further. Not yet. There was something sacred in the way the earth had held her. But he knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Mr. Whitmore's smile still appeared in the hallway every morning. Calm, polished, unreadable. But David could see the edges now. The way the man blinked too much. The slight twitch in his cheek when passing the garden. The way his fingers fumbled over his keyboard in the teacher's lounge. David had planted fear like a seed, and it was beginning to grow. On the fourth Thursday since David returned, the school hosted parents' back-to-school night. All staff had to stay late. Teachers were required to give short presentations about their curriculum, and the janitorial staff had to clean up after Dot. David stayed late too. He waited until the building emptied. Midnight came, then 1. By 1:34 a.m., only one classroom still had light spilling out beneath the door. Room 113. Whitmore's room. David approached slowly. No footsteps, just breath, calm and low. He peeked through the narrow glass window on the door. Whitmore sat at his desk, staring at a paper in his hand. His face was pale, sweaty. On the desk beside him sat a half-drunk bottle of whiskey and a nearly full ashtray. He hadn't noticed the hallway. He didn't even notice the flickering overhead light. David watched for nearly 20 minutes before slipping away silently into the dark. He didn't need a confession. He just needed a crack. The next morning, David stood in the supply closet, flipping through an old inventory binder. The back of the pages were filled with old student names, checklists, faded scrawls of forgotten staff. At the bottom of one page, in pencil barely visible, he saw a list dated from March 16th, 2016, 2 days after Rose vanished. Lunchroom, gymnasium, East Wing storage, greenhouse, garden shed. There were initials beside each area. WMST, EW, and then EW, East Wing, WH Whitmore, and beside garden shed. There was no name, just an X. David closed the binder, jaw tightening. There had been a search, even among the sheds. But someone had marked that spot differently. Someone had known, or had made sure no one did. That night, David returned to the garden again, flashlight off, tools in his pack. This time, he dug slower, more carefully. A few feet west of where he found the sneaker, at a depth of about 3 feet, his spade hit something not soft. Would he stopped, pulled his gloves tighter, hands trembling. Another inch. The outline of a small wooden crate appeared, half from years of rain and soil. He pried the top open. Inside, wrapped in clear plastic and duct tape, was a bundle of objects: a hairbrush, a child's diary, a set of bracelets, a pair of pink hair ties, and a folded letter. He unfolded it with shaking hands. It read, I didn't mean to. She wouldn't stop crying. She said she was going to tell. I panicked. It was an accident. I buried her. I thought I could live with it. I was wrong. No signature, no dates, but the handwriting, even through the years, matched one thing: the notes Whitmore left on the classroom whiteboard. David didn't take the box with him. He reburied it. Deeper this time. Because what was coming next didn't need evidence. It needed fear. 3 days later, Whitmore walked into his classroom to find a photo on his desk. It was old, black and white. A picture of the garden, zoomed in, with a red circle, drawn over the exact spot Rose was buried. No note, no name, just the image. That afternoon, he requested early leave for personal stress. He didn't return to school the next day, but David did, and he saw the shift. Teachers murmured, staff whispered. He's not well, they said. Something's bothering him. David kept quiet, smiled, raked leaves. At night, he made copies. Of the photo, dozens. One slipped into Whitmore's mailbox. One taped to the windshield of his car. One delivered to the local church. The whispers turned to rumors by Friday. He stopped showing up entirely. 1 week later, David sat at the diner sipping burnt coffee, watching rain slide down the glass. A young woman, early 20s, approached his booth. "You're new here?" she asked. David looked up, nodded. Once she hesitated, then slid into the seat across from him. "I was in Mr. Whitmore's class, the year Rose went missing." His heart froze. She looked down at her hands, fingers tightening. I saw something. That day, but I was a kid. I didn't know what to do." David didn't speak, just waited. She continued. "It was after school. I forgot my jacket, came back inside. The hallway was empty, except near the art room. I saw him, Mr. Whitmore, holding her hand, Rose. She looked scared, I thought. Maybe she was in trouble. Then he looked up, saw me. I ran." David felt his nails dig into his palm. "Why didn't you say anything?" "I did," she whispered. "I told the nurse, but she said, not to make stories up, that Whitmore was a good man." Of course he was. To them, David stood slowly and walked out into the rain that night. The local police department received a package, no return address. Inside, a copy of the photo, the wooden box, and the letter. With it, one sentence, typed in bold. "This is what you missed. Do better." Back at Maple Hollow Elementary, in the dead of night, David stood alone in the garden once more. The moon hung low. The soil was still. Beneath his boots, silence, but behind his eyes, fire. This wasn't justice, not yet. The night after the box was mailed, David didn't go home. He stayed near the school. Across the street, sitting in his truck with the headlights off and the heater barely running. A thermos of black coffee kept his hands warm, but his mind was elsewhere. He didn't know what the police would do, if anything. Would they open an investigation again? Or shove the box into a file cabinet with the others labeled unsolved? He didn't trust them. Not this town. Not after what they'd allowed to happen to his daughter. At 3:22 a.m., a squad car pulled up to the back of Maple Hollow Elementary, too. Officers stepped out, flashlights in hand. David watched, unmoving. They stood near the garden. They didn't dig. They didn't measure. They just talked. Then they got back in their car and left. David closed his eyes, jaw clenched so tight it ached. They weren't going to do a damn thing. The next morning, he showed up for work, like always. The garden looked untouched. No crime scene tape. No markers. Not even a boot print in the fresh soil. Inside the teacher's lounge, the whispers had grown louder. Whitmore's gone. Quit, suddenly. He left town. But David didn't believe it. Men like Whitmore don't just leave. They hide. Or worse, they watch. That night, David stood in the basement of the school. Few knew it existed. It was meant for storage. Old filing cabinets, broken chairs, science fair boards from 2007. But he remembered it from when Rose was still alive. She had once mentioned a room with a leaky pipe that smelled like dead crayons. She described it in vivid detail, how the light buzzed, how the floor was always wet. David never thought much of it until now. There it was, room B07. Unmarked, he used a key he'd taken from the janitor's board. The door creaked, the air was damp, still cold. Mold had crept across the walls like veins. A single bulb flickered overhead, in the center of the room. An old desk, and on top of it was a dusty Polaroid photo. David picked it up, heart racing. It was of Rose, smiling, wearing the same dress. She vanished in his breath, caught in his throat. She was in the school after hours. This photo wasn't in any police file. He'd have remembered. Someone took this and kept it down here, like a trophy. A slow-burning rage twisted in David's chest. He opened the desk drawers. Empty. Empty. Locked. He used his pocket knife to pry it open. Inside, nothing but a ring of keys. 23 of them, all school-labeled. But one had a tag that said House 87. He didn't recognize it, but he knew where to find out. At the county building, old property records weren't digitized. David had to sift through microfilm, but there it was. House 87, Maple Grove Lane, owned by Eugene Whitmore, transferred into a trust account the year after. Rose vanished, unoccupied, deemed abandoned 3 years ago, still legally his dot David. Drove there just after midnight. The house stood alone, 2 miles out of town. No neighbors, no porch light, just a bent mailbox and a rusted gate hanging from one hinge. He got out, key in hand, no backup, no flashlight, just instinct and fury. The key slid in. The door opened. Dust hit his lungs like poison. Cobwebs blanketed. The corners, the air smelled like old wood and wet stone. He moved room to room, quiet, patient. The living room was empty. So was the kitchen. But in the basement, he found it. A photo board pinned with dozens of images. Kids from the school, class, photos, playground shots. But in the center was Rose, circle drawn around her face in red ink. Beside it, a list of names. David read them one by one. All girls, all between 8 and 12. Some had check marks. Beside them, some had crosses. Some were scratched out entirely. Rose's name was underlined 3 times at the bottom of the page. One word, scrawled in all caps. LIAR. David stepped back. The entire board was Whitmore's obsession. His private hell. David didn't need to see more. He took photos. He took the list, and then he pulled out the gasoline can he'd brought. Just in case, he lit the house on fire from the inside, walked out with the wind at his back, didn't look behind him once. The next morning, the house was Ashdod. No report was filed, no investigation launched, just a small note in the local paper. Unoccupied property destroyed by accidental fire. David smiled bitterly as he folded the page and dropped it in the trash. If no one else would bring justice, he would. Later that day, the sheriff himself came by the school. Sheriff Mark Halberd, tall, thin, balding, smile like a blade. He pulled David aside in the parking lot. "You were Rose Carter's father, weren't you?" David nodded. The sheriff studied him. "We received a strange package last week. No fingerprints, no DNA. Contained materials from an old missing person case. Yours." David said nothing. The sheriff didn't blink. "You want answers. I get that. I'm a father too. But digging into this now, it might bring up things people worked real hard to bury." David's face remained stone still. "You think I care?" he said quietly. The sheriff sighed. "Just be careful where you walk, Mr. Carter. You might step on something sharp." And then he left. David watched his car disappear and realized Whitmore wasn't the only one with something to hide. This went deeper, and next time he'd start digging up the people in power. 3 days passed, 3 long, silent days. David returned to the school each morning, clipped hedges, swept the walkways, and watered the very soil where his daughter's body had once rested, pretending nothing had changed. But everything had. He'd burned Whitmore's house to the ground. He'd discovered a twisted collage of children, markings, and a name list that suggested Rose wasn't his only victim. And then there was Sheriff Halbert's warning, a warning that made David certain of one thing. People in Maple Hollow knew, maybe not everyone, but enough to bury the truth and let a monster teach 3rd grade for another 9 years. That night, David opened the list again. 12 names, 4 crossed out, 3 checked, 5 underlined. Most he didn't recognize, but one did stand out. Jessica Laney. That name, he remembered her from Rose's old class. Blonde girl, big glasses. Moved away the summer after Rose vanished, or so they said. The next day, David visited the Maple Hollow Public Library. No records under the name Jessica Laney in the last decade, but in the newspaper archive, a tiny article from 9 years ago, only weeks after Rose disappeared. Family of Jessica Laney leaves Maple Hollow following daughter's mental health crisis. No follow-up, no address, just silence. But something about that name tugged at him that night. He did something he hadn't done in years. He logged into his old laptop and searched Facebook. Jessica Laney. Over 300 profiles. He narrowed it down. Female. Likely 22 now. Most were private, but one had a cover photo of Maple Hollow's town square and a profile picture of a young woman. Dark circles under her eyes, holding a dog. David messaged her. "Hi Jessica, you don't know me, but I was Rose Carter's father. I need to ask you something about Maple Hollow, please." He didn't expect a reply, but 10 minutes later, 3 dots appeared. Then, I remember, they agreed to meet 2 towns over in a diner called the Rusted Fork. Jessica arrived, wrapped in an oversized hoodie, sleeves tugged down over her hands. Her eyes flicked to every corner of the restaurant before she sat. David didn't waste time, did he? Hurt you? Jessica's jaw trembled, but she didn't cry. She nodded once. "Mr. Whitmore?" She nodded again. "I told my mum," she whispered. "She said I was imagining it, that I was too old to play pretend. But I know what he did, and I know I wasn't the only one." David clenched his fists under the table. "Why didn't anyone believe you?" She looked up then, Not at him, but behind him, I think. They did, she said. They just didn't want to admit it. My dad worked for the school board. He told my mum to drop it, said it would ruin us. And Rose? He asked softly. Jessica's mouth tightened. She was always his favorite. He called her his little Melody. I think, when she started fighting back, he got scared. I think he did something. David's eyes filled with heat. Jessica slid a folded piece of paper across the table. After we left town, my dad burned most of my things, but I kept this. It was a drawing, a childish sketch of Mr. Whitmore's classroom, but there were red marks all over the back wall, and written in Rose's handwriting, unmistakable, the words, "He hurts us here." That night, David didn't sleep. He paced. The apartment above the town garage where he stayed. The place smelled of oil and rust. The only sound was the tick of the old wall clock. He didn't need more proof. He had enough, but now he wanted the town to see it. He wanted everyone to remember what they'd let happen. And more than anything, he wanted Whitmore to suffer. But something Jessica said stuck in his mind. He called her his little Melody. Melody dotted rifled. Through his storage bins, through school papers, drawings, photo albums, until he found it, an old cassette tape labeled Rose third grade music class in her handwriting. He popped it into a dusty player. Static, then a piano, then a girl's voice, sweet, nervous, singing a tune about stars and dreams and clouds. Halfway through the tape, it stopped. Click, then a different voice. Male, start again. David froze. It wasn't a teacher's voice. It was flat, cold, too. Rehearsed, then rose again. Singing, then again, the male voice, slower. David felt his stomach twist. This wasn't a class tape. This was control, repetition, fear at the very end. Just as the tape clicked out, he heard it. A whisper, so faint he almost missed it. Please, let me go. He stared at the player like it was haunted. This was the final proof. Audio of Whitmore. Coaxing, demanding, breaking the next day. He slipped another anonymous envelope into the mailbox at the sheriff's office. Inside the tape, a photo of the burn site. The drawing from Jessica. A typed letter. You didn't listen in 2016. You didn't act in 2025. You have one last chance to do the right thing. Tick-tock. No signature, just a single typed line at the bottom. He hurts us here. The next morning, the sheriff's office parking lot was swarming. 3 patrol vehicles sat idling. Doors open, lights off, but ready. Sheriff Halberd stood outside with a file folder clenched tight in his hands. He wasn't speaking, just staring at the envelope, like it might explode. Inside his office, the tape played over and over again. Start again, slower, please, let me go. The female deputy, Marla Rhodes, looked up from the playback machine, her face pale, voice hollow. That's her, isn't it? She asked. Halberd didn't answer. By noon, the fire chief had officially ruled the house fire deliberate, but no suspect had been named. No warrant issued, and no statement was made to the public. But the whispers were growing. A substitute teacher overheard the janitor muttering something about Whitmore's burning secrets. A grocery cashier said she saw David Carter walk out of the library with old yearbooks and a rage in his eyes. And then, the tape leaked. Someone no one knew who slipped a digital version onto a local true crime Facebook group. It spread like wildfire. Maple Hollow hadn't trended online in decades. Now it was climbing hashtag Charts under. Hashtag Maple Hollow vanished. Hashtag Melody Tape. Hashtag Justice for Rose. That night, David sat alone in the school garden. The one he had trimmed and groomed and restored over the last month. The garden where Rose had once sat, just feet from where her body had been buried. He didn't feel peace, not yet, but he felt the town waking up, and then a sound, shoes, crunching. Gravel, he looked up. Sheriff Halberd stood at the gate. No uniform, just jeans, boots, and a grim expression. "I know it was you," he said quietly. David didn't move. "I can't prove it, and hell, part of me doesn't want to." The sheriff walked closer. "But what you did burning down his house doesn't change the fact that the law failed your daughter. We all did." David's voice was sharp. "You knew, didn't you?" Halberd didn't answer at first. "I knew something wasn't right. The day your wife came in crying, begging us to check Whitmore's house. I sent a unit. They knocked," he answered, smiling. "Calm," said Rose had left the school like always. "And you believed him?" "I wanted to believe her just ran off, like the others, like kids do. But she didn't," David said. "She was here the whole time." Halberd sat down on the bench across from him. "I listened to the tape, and I read your letter. But if I reopen this case now formally, will get ugly. People will lose jobs, maybe lives. You ready for that?" David nodded slowly. "Then be ready for what's next." 2 days later, an emergency school board meeting was held. For the first time in years, the Whitmore file was opened this time, by people who had once sealed it. The principal had no answers. The superintendent resigned within the week. But still, there was no formal arrest, no charge, no trial, because Whitmore was gone. Vanished, his bank account. Empty, his car. Abandoned on a back road to counties over. No note, no trace, no sightings. David sat in his truck outside. Rose's grave, that same week, not the shallow, a hidden one behind the school. The real one, now rebuilt, engraved and surrounded by white. Rose's, he brought a copy of the tape, and a fresh music box. He played it. Let her hear it, and whispered, "I'll never stop." Then, the package arrived. No return address, no stamps, just a small cardboard box placed outside the sheriff's door. Inside, a single cassette tape, labeled Track 13, and underneath it, a child's pink hair clip, burnt at the edge. The box sat unopened for an hour. Sheriff Halberd stared at it like it might bite him. It didn't have to be from Whitmore, but deep down they all knew. He finally put on gloves, cut the tape, and opened it. The pink hair clip sat on top, melted, slightly at the edge. It was unmistakable. Then the tape dot, old, fragile, the label, Track 13. He popped it into a working cassette player. No intro this time, just static. Then a voice, Whitmore single, quotes but not the cool, calm voice from earlier recordings. This was different, ragged, desperate. "I know you're listening. You think you understand, but you don't, not really. She was never supposed to be there that day." Pause, heavy breathing. "I told her to stay after class because she failed the quiz. That's all it was supposed to be. But she looked at me like I was nothing, like I was trash." Another pause, her scream. It's still in my ears. "I didn't plan it, I swear. But she fought so hard." The tape clicked, then silence, then a new voice. David's, "You ran, like a coward, but you'll never be free." And then, The faint sound of digging, metal scraping soil. 1, 2, 13 shovels worth, then nothing. The tape ended. Sheriff Halberd stood motionless. The deputy, watching from the doorway, didn't say a word. He reached for the phone, but didn't dial. He looked at the envelope beside the box. Inside was a Polaroid, old, grainy, a cabin in the woods, Ann, X, marked on the front door. David was already gone. He left the garden tools in the shed, left the truck unlocked, left no note, but someone saw him. A hiker in the state forest, 5 miles outside of Maple Hollow. Said he saw a man hauling a duffel bag and a shovel. Said he looked calm, top to calm. The cabin was found days later, emptied, blood on the floorboards, ashes in the fireplace, and a final note carved into the wall by knife. Rose got peace. So did I. Weeks pass. Then months. Search teams found no body, no tracks, nothing. Town. The town tried to move on, tried to forget. The garden behind the school was replaced with concrete. The bench removed, the soil paved over, but the flowers kept growing through the cracks. White roses, always white roses. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Rose's disappearance, a package arrived at the sheriff's new office. No address, no name. Inside, a new cassette tape, labeled Track 14. He didn't play it. Not yet. Instead, he walked to Rose's grave, placed it beneath the headstone, and said, "She won't need to hear you anymore." Some say David Carter died that night, in the woods. Others believe he became something else. A shadow in the trees, a whisper in the classroom, a gardener for the dead. But one thing is certain: the teacher vanished, the truth came out, and justice, though slow, still bloomed.